What's going on, everybody? Just want to let you know our sponsors going forward for our future episodes. We are sponsored by Red Clover Coffee. So if you go to redclovercoffee.com and type in code IWP at checkout, you'll save 10% site wide. Also, we are sponsored by Performance Supplements. So if you go over to performancesup with 2ps.com and type in code IWP at checkout, you'll save 15% site wide. And our third sponsor is we are sponsored by Crunch Fitness up here in Northern California. Thank you, guys. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Intel Within podcast. I have amazing guests here, Clive Savacool. If I pronounce that correctly, is that how you pronounce it?
That's it. Yeah.
Too easy. So we are going to be going over the interview with him, his 25 years as a paramedic, the app that he created, and just kind of get to know him a little better in the aspect of, why he got into the career of going into being a paramedic, doing it for 25 years, and, what transitioned him over into creating the app is it LogRx, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And I was a
Okay.
firefighter too, along
Fine.
that,
Okay.
that time period.
Okay. So, let's just, if you want to take the wheel here and just kind of, you know, introduce yourself and kind of talk about the career that you had and then what you're doing now with your life and how you've transitioned away from it.
Yeah. So first off, thanks for having me. I've been a firefighter and a paramedic for 25 plus years. I started in the San Francisco Bay Area, big department, Contra Costa County, which is right kind of next to Oakland for people that aren't from California.
Hmm.
Spent time there, and then I took a fire chief job up in northern by Sacramento, and then my last 2 years as a fire chief, I was the fire chief at South Lake Tahoe. And I ended up leaving there to run a startup company that I founded back in 2016 that was taken off. And so
Mm.
it basically used my skills and experience to go into the entrepreneurial world and start my own software company.
So how was now I tried to do a little bit of research on you as well. And were you involved with the huge fire that happened in 2021 up here in Northern California?
It was the Caldor Fire that took about 5 years off my life. It was
Um,
it was exciting. I mean, it was stressful, but I look back on it fondly actually.
it's we had because I know I was stationed in New Mexico at the time, and her brother. So I live over. I mean, not to like give it completely away, but I live in the Fairfield area, but on like the hill side of it. And my brother-in-law lives, or his old house is about 6 minutes away from us. And he was sending us pictures, and the skies were red. I mean, there was just, asphalt everywhere, covered all sorts of things. Um, and I don't know if that fire was part of it or if it drifted down or if there was another fire going on. But I had a buddy that was stationed in SoCal a little bit, and it was the same thing, red skies and all sorts of stuff. And I remember my brother-in-law sending us pictures, and I mean it's pretty scary. I mean, like as red as the flag back here, the skies were covered. You couldn't see anything. They're evacuating people. Our base was going off base and getting people to bring them on base and putting them in hotels. So, if you could kind of like walk us through that experience and what you had to do to like strategy wise and just to do your job to the best of your ability.
Yeah, so the smoke was throughout California, all over from not just the Caldor Fire, but we had a big fire going just north of it as well in like the
Hmm.
Susanville area, which is Northern California. And it was really bad. There was news reports. I was doing news interviews with like Sky News in England, and they were doing
Oh,
satellite images of the
geez.
smoke from
Hmm.
Tahoe, and it was bad. They had a report that we had the worst air quality on the planet. And so it was really bad. In fact, I have lung problems, and I had to drive down to Sacramento during the fire for one day to get some medicine. I had special order some medicine to keep my lungs open. But
Wow.
um, yeah, it was quite an experience. We evacuated 20, 30,000 people on it was like August 30th. After the fire had
Hmm.
been burning a couple weeks, and it got up to Tahoe. It was one of those situations where you hope for the best but plan for the worst. And fortunately,
Hmm.
I'd worked with the police department, Cal Fire, and the sheriff's department to develop an evacuation plan, ironically, months earlier. It hadn't been updated in years, and so I created this evacuation plan with the other folks. It wasn't just me. and it was adopted by the city council that like August 3rd. And when I built it, I thought, okay, we're never actually going to evacuate Tahoe. That's never actually happened.
Right.
And sure enough, less than a month later, we actually put that into play. So it was pretty crazy. It went as smooth as you could for a fire like that. We evacuated tens of thousands of people in 4.5 hours because
Wow.
of the coordination. It wasn't easy, but it's kind of goes back to just working well with your neighbors, coordinating, planning ahead. Um, and so I think a combination of things are what made that successful.
So is
We didn't
there
lose a single house in Tahoe.
wow. Yeah, because I've only been to South Lake Tahoe one time. Of course, it's freaking beautiful the time that we went, but to know that not a single home was lost, destroyed is obviously is the key, and no one was. I'm hoping no one was hurt in that sense, or any kind of injuries in that sense. Um, the question I was going to ask is, how many guys were on that, in that job in that sense, or is it just kind of like all hands on deck, and of course, the training, how often do you guys train for stuff like this?
Great question. So for a massive wildfire, which we're having a lot of them now in California,
Mm.
um, the Cal Fire and the Forest Service are really good at organizing what they call an incident management team. And so when you have a massive fire, they'll send in these teams. It'll just be like one team initially that comes in. They're running the fire, and that's like all they do every summer, and they are just dialed at it. So they'll come in, they'll set up all their different divisions, logistics, operations, communications, all these different sections. So they are so good at it. So they just come in, they work with local government, which I was the fire chief for a city. And so they are already dialed in these game plans. And then we share the local knowledge with them. They work with us to come up with a common plan. So like we shared our evacuation plan with them. We told them what we had in mind. And so they were very in having that set. And so what they do is they call in resources from throughout the country, not just the state. And so they'll call in, thousands of firefighters based off their projected needs. And then what we did at Tahoe is we saw that, hey, they're strapped because there was another major fire, as I mentioned, going north of us. And so while Cal Fire and the Forest Service are getting their teams ready, this was right day of the evacuation. I contacted my um, folks that I knew in the Sacramento area and said, "Hey, can you send me additional resources outside of an incident?" Meaning they're not assigned to the incident team. They're coming up to coordinate with our local fire chiefs and division chiefs and battalion chiefs to have a defense plan for like the city itself. So that way the incident management team can focus on the vegetation and then we'll coordinate. All of us coordinated. We're making sure that we're all on the same
Mhm.
page. We're with the operations team. But what I did is I got extra resources up into Tahoe so that on that day, I can't remember if it was August 30th or 31st, 2021, but a huge fight. We were all up that entire night. So we evacuated the city earlier in the day. And we were just planning for that fire cresting the hill. And to that date, no fire had ever come from outside of the Lake Tahoe basin into Lake Tahoe, which then created a false sense of security because everyone's like, "Oh,
Mm.
it's never happened,
Too
so it's
easy,
not
yeah.
gonna happen." And so for people that aren't familiar with Lake Tahoe that are listening, it's a giant bowl. I mean, the lake is 22 miles long by I think 7 miles wide, so it's huge, but it's a bowl. It's surrounded by mountains, and so no one expected the fire to come over because their argument was, "Well, it's granite mountains. The fire's not gonna burn granite." Oh, sure enough, it was spotting, a half mile to a mile ahead because of
Yeah.
the winds. And so, fortunately, because CAL FIRE, the Forest Service, and all the local government were ready, and the sheriff's department, they were amazing. It actually we were prepared that day when it came over.
It's I know that across like the state of California in general, I have like some numbers here and I'm sure it fluctuates. I kind of try to round up, but it said in 2021 alone in California that there was now not necessarily the Lake Tahoe because you said there's no homes destroyed in that sense, but in California, 3,600 buildings were destroyed. There's over 8,600 fires, 3 deaths across the whole year in the state, and there's 22 non-fatal injuries and over 2.5 to almost 2.6 million acres burned. So like the training that you guys go through, do you guys, is it like a weekly, monthly, like how do you guys do this training to be able to combat this and get these numbers as small as you guys can, of course?
So there's set number of hours that you're supposed to train per
Mhm.
month on different disciplines. So it might be, 2 hours on vehicle extrication, 10 hours on emergency medical services. And so you have a lot of different hours you're assigned to do. And what we'll do is we'll set up training based off the time of year. And so in the spring, we'll do a lot of training for wildland fires. We'll do training for off-road driving. And so that you're prepped. And then in the fall, you do a lot of like vehicle extrication where you cut people out of cars with a lot of training in the fall,
Mhm.
because when the rains come, people get in more car accidents. And so you kind of schedule your training around what your projections are on injuries. In Tahoe, we had a lot of water rescues, and so we would do a lot of boat training in the spring. Um, and so that's kind of how the training goes in to help keep things organized. The other thing that what we're really good at in California, and I give credit to like Cal Fire, is they have and the Forest Service, they have a lot of safety protocols in place.
Mhm.
And so as a subordinate, if I give somebody an order and say, "Hey, I need you to take a hose line up that hill with your crew, do a hose lay up the hill," they can refuse that order. They can say it's not safe. And granted, there's a process.
Okay.
They gotta fill out a form and there has to be a declaration. It's formalized. If
Mhm.
something's not safe, they give authority to everyone, like, "Hey, this is the number one priorities that make sure you're safe." Because maybe those guys in the hose line, they're not just trying to be difficult. Maybe they see something I don't. And so, are really good on putting safety first. And in every briefing, they'll do a couple a day. Um, they'll have a whole talk on safety that everyone is part of. And so we're really good on that piece to help reduce injuries. And anytime there is a serious injury, they do a report. They call it a green sheet, which is basically a thorough report on that injury. Usually it's a significant injury or fatality. And they'll evaluate kind of like you would with an airplane crash. When the FAA comes in,
Okay.
and they recreate that airplane crash in a hangar somewhere, and they'll figure out exactly what went wrong. And so they'll do the same thing with their firefighter fatality or injury. Then they'll do training on it. So all of us learn from that mistake. Because every time there's a mistake, there's like they call it a chain. I'm not sure if it's the same in the military, but there's a chain of events. And they look at that chain of events and they say, if we broke one of those links, this wouldn't have occurred. And so what can we do to prevent these things from occurring? That's what they do in these injuries, and that's why those numbers are probably not as high as people would expect considering how many fires we had in 2021.
Yeah, we of course there's things too, like we have, exercises and trainings and stuff like that. Could it be a little bit more, in my opinion, for the military? Yes, I'm not just saying this because of us talking off camera, me getting, out of the military here very soon, but I I don't know if it's just the way I was raised or the generation is different, but you can never have too much training and to prepare you for stuff. And when you're squared away and something happens, like you should be in top tier shape and be ready to rock and roll and fall back on training, as they always say. Um, so is it? So you were saying that, like, Cal Fire kind of has like the say so of like no, but then they have to document everything, X, Y, and Z. So have you? Is it ever come down to where you're trying to make like a suggestion in that sense, and it's kind of like a clash of heads of like, well, I like this is what I see, this is what I know is good, and then they're just kind of like, oh no, does it ever come to something like that to where you guys are kind of like clashing, to try to come up with a solution?
Um, I'm sure that's happened, but what
Yeah.
I've always told my staff is the fire ground is not a democracy.
Hmm.
Just like the military, we have chain of command.
Hmm.
Even say when I was a battalion chief in the San Francisco Bay Area, if I was at a fire in another battalion, and so when I get there, I'm the battalion chief. It's my district. I'm what they call an incident commander. So I'm in
Yep.
charge. So I don't care if the fire chief shows up, my boss, I'm still in charge of that fire because I'm the incident commander. Now he could take incident command from me,
Hmm.
but that doesn't really occur unless someone's doing something egregious. But they recognize there is a chain of command, and usually you'll have a safety officer on a fire as well, and so they could chime in and say, "Hey, I don't know if you saw it, but the backside of this roof is sagging. It looks like it's going to collapse. You should pull the guys out of the second floor." And then the incident commander would take that information and say, "All right, crews in second floor, I need you to evacuate. Crews in the first floor, start backing out." And so you can take that information from others, but the clashing part, uh, honestly, I see the clashing occur more at like the command posts on major fires.
Okay.
So like for the Caldor Fire, we were debating when we should repopulate the city. It was about
Oh
a
wow.
week after we evacuated, and we were um, professionally having different discussions on some wanted to wait,
Hmm.
some wanted to do it when we did it. I didn't want to wait. Some other people wanted to wait, and so we all got into a room, closed the door, and had some frank conversations, and came to an agreement, and came out of the room and repopulated. So,
So no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so when there are clashes, you try not to take things personal, try to be professional.
Yeah.
Um, on the fire ground itself, it really shouldn't happen too much.
That's. I mean, it's nice to like know that and see that because yeah, I'm not gonna not trying to bash anything on the end of the military, but man, it's just almost like there's too many chiefs, not enough Indians in that sense, where everybody's trying to, it's some people kind of see it like it's my way or the highway kind of deal, but it's nice to know that it's a little bit better on your end of that aspect. And so being over here in or being in NorCal in that sense, is there ever a time to where you guys have to travel 3, 4, 5 hours south to go handle a fire, or is it only when it's like a state of emergency, or if you guys have extra bodies that you guys go down there? How does that look if it's just, if you guys are only secluded in that area, or do you guys branch out?
Another great question. So what every local government does is we get onto like a mutual aid agreement with the rest of the state. There's actual term for the agreement, but basically what it says is we will volunteer resources to send throughout the state when asked for help.
Mhm.
And what's great about the West Coast is, I keep giving props to Cal Fire, but they're and the Forest Service is very, very organized. And so what they do is it's not just, hey, we have a massive fire in San Diego, all hands on deck, and everyone just sends what they can. It's, hey, we need 5 strike teams from Region 2. And so that Region 2 coordinator will say, hey, I need 5 strike teams, which is 5 engines each. So I need um, all these resources to get together. Here's the rendezvous point. Which agency can give what? And then each agency will get the call and they'll say, okay, I can send 2 Type 1 engines or 2 Type 3 engines. And then what they'll do is they'll say, okay, stand by. And they'll call back, say, okay, we'll take those resources. We'll send them to a rendezvous point, and then they'll all get together. And a strike team is 5 engines.
Mhm.
And so if it's 5 strike teams, they'll have 25 engines. They'll just head down Highway 5 to Southern California in a single line. And they'll go and then they'll meet at like the base camp down in San Diego. And there's strict rules. Like if you've been on the road a certain amount of time, you've got to take a certain amount of rest period. Sometimes you go straight to work, but it is very organized and it's kind of at the beginning of the season. They'll say who can give what. There's times when we were shorthanded in Tahoe where I just said, hey, for the next month, I'm so short staffed. You have to pull us out of the rotation.
Yeah, give them a heads up. So what? Let's back up before this. So, what was Clive doing as a younger kid growing up? And then what like made you want to become a firefighter, EMT paramedic?
I was very squirrely. I was a little ADH kid
Hmm.
bouncing off the walls. They knew me first name basis at the ER. I couldn't tell you how many bones I broke in my life. And I thought I wanted to be an engineer because my dad was an engineer and I looked up to him. And I got a job in high school at the Shell refinery in Martinez. Martinez, for people who don't know it, is just full of refineries. Like that's where I grew up.
Oh, geez.
And so, yeah, and so I got a job at a refinery and I worked in an engineer's office and I would file papers and I knew that I would kill myself in that kind of work. And so at the same time, I was a pole vaulter in high school. I was a terrible
Oh,
student
wow.
until I got into sports. And once I got into sports, I started excelling in everything. It kind of reined me in. So my pole vault coach was a firefighter, and he started telling me about it every day at practice. He'd have a story about drive-by shooting the night before, or going to a house fire and pulling a dog out or something like that. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, that's what I want to do. Something different every day. And I'd actually enlisted in the army um, to be an army ranger, and then I got hired to the fire department and backed out because I hadn't shipped out yet.
They took you
And
from us from the military.
yeah, so I was like, well, I want to be a firefighter. And I was told, once you get an offer from that, you don't turn it down. And it wasn't a full-time job, it was a part-time position, but
Mm.
I was told once you get an offer, you don't pass it up. Because back in the 90s, it was near impossible to get a fire department job.
Really? Wow.
Oh yeah. So as
Why
a
is
kid,
that?
I was very much everyone wanted to be firefighters. Everyone.
So now it's just
Backdraft.
declined a lot, or
Yeah. Yep. You It's very hard. So like when I was testing, and it took me like 50 tests. It was in the high 40s before I actually
jeez.
got a job where I wanted to be. And in Tahoe, when I was trying to hire paramedics, we would get maybe 8 applicants and 3 would pull out. Wouldn't even finish the testing. And so I'm not sure why people just don't want to be firefighters as much as they used to.
Mhm.
Newer generations. When I was younger, you wanted job security. I was raised
Oh
by
yeah.
baby boomers, and so job security was a big thing. Fire department is a good job, good pension, good pay. And I just don't think that people are as looking for that as much as they used to, which is in some ways. You only live once. And so it's nice that people bounce around. I'm doing that now. I left before I could collect my pension from Tahoe, start
Even after
a company.
25 years in total, like being the career?
Yeah. So I have 2 separate pensions. I have one from the Bay Area, which I left early, so
Okay.
I get that pension. But yeah, my pension from being a fire chief for 2 departments of the fire chief at, I can't collect until I'm 57 and I'm 45. So I I figure you live once, so I'm not gonna wait till I'm 57 to then go start a company, you know?
I completely understand that because it's sometimes when you're doing the entrepreneur life and you kind of like you throw that reel out there and you kind of get that little jiggle, you want to take that bite and just kind of run with it, and yeah, not to like get down more personal on me, but owning 3 businesses at a time, and it's like, you kinda trust your gut and you just go with it, and sometimes those uncomfortable situations or decisions are gonna be the best ones for you, and it seems like that has been the better decision for you going on with what we're gonna talk about, a little bit later with the app that you have. Um, so you were a pole vaulter in school, coach was a firefighter, kind of wanted to get you involved in that, something new, something different every day, which is that's why like over here at the base that I'm stationed at, it is essentially sometimes it is like that. I mean, eh, I like something new, something different because it's not so mundane, and it's just kind of you get that excitement and it's like that rush essentially for some people, and it's just like that thrill of there's a challenge, and it's not going to be the same thing where you're sitting there 9 to 5, like you said, possibly filing paperwork. So what happened after that with the pole vault and your coach being a firefighter in that sense? Like how did you kind of spring forward from there?
Um, I looked at what I had around, so I looked at the steps to become a firefighter, and so,
Mhm.
my uncle actually worked for a fire department in HR. He was never a firefighter. He did personnel stuff, but he still was around it, so he introduced me to some firefighters. I went to firehouses, asked them what to do. One of them told me to go to, Solano College, not too far from you,
Mhm.
because they had a reputable fire academy. Um, and there was a fire department near there that he had stayed at during his academy, and so contacted them. They said, "Yeah, I could stay there," because I couldn't afford to stay at home and drive to the college, even though it was like a half hour. I had no money. I was
Mm.
18. And actually, when I first left high school, I went to Shasta College, start there, and I was gonna live at a KOA campground, and they ended up canceling the class. And so I drove back down, registered at Solano College, and basically, um, lived on their couch and actually slept in my truck most of the time in the parking lot next door, just because they only had 4 beds, and usually they were full with volunteers, so I'd go sleep in my truck. But I
Mhm.
did that for a semester, got my fire academy out of the way, started a EMT class the next semester, and then I went full bore into paramedic. Because back then, as I mentioned, so many people wanted to be firefighters, and so you would go to these tests, and they'd have a test for an EMT position and a test
Mhm.
for a paramedic firefighter position. You'd see thousands of guys in line for the EMT firefighter position
Jeez.
and dozens in the line for the paramedics. So I was like, "That line's a lot shorter. I'm gonna go there." And so I took out a personal loan and went to medic school in Vacaville, actually.
Okay.
Um, and I think I was a licensed paramedic before I was age 21, so I could administer narcotics before I could drink alcohol.
I know I had some friends that went through like ENT or EMT paramedic school, and they would always tell me like it's like the hardest thing that they've ever done, like school wise, and it was just so intense. But now they've continued their careers as if as you did yours. So what is something that 25 years is a long time, so don't kill me on this question, but what is like one of like your most like prestigious like memories of your career, if you'd say?
Um, I did a lot at South Lake Tahoe, and so I was able to put a lot of feathers in my cap during the pandemic.
Okay.
I accomplished a ton up there. I rebuilt their communication system, or new CAD system, which is dispatched on GPS. I built up automatic aid with neighbors. I balanced the budget to keep all the fire stations open. And the list goes on, including managing the pandemic. I vaccinated 30% of the community, like 19 different vaccine clinics. Not just me personally, but I helped organize them for the
Mhm.
city. Had a lot there. But the high point was at Contra Costa Fire, where I spent most of my career. I promoted up to training chief, and this is my last position there. And one of the things that I've always loved is kind of training aspect of the job, because you mentioned
Mhm.
earlier, moments of crisis, you fall back on your training, which essentially is your muscle memory. And
Correct.
we had a double line of duty death at the station I worked at in 2007. And so after that, my whole mindset was let's fix things here. So when I became training chief, thought, okay, where does that start? And it's the academy. And so we completely scrapped the fire academy. I brought in like 5 guys from the field to work with me in training, and we completely revamped it. And to this day, that was 10 years ago. They're still using the academy that I built down there. And that department's one of the biggest in the state now because they've consolidated a bunch. So
Oh,
I
jeez.
think the work I did in training with the staff I had, I'm really proud of.
That's a commendable thing that to utilize and implement and come up with it and then still use it and to know that is pretty cool. So I am gonna pull a question from my buddy that I was telling you about earlier. So I do have some people that submitted questions and then I have some questions of my own. This is gonna kind of go. This is gonna bounce around. So his question was, let's see. Um, I'm gonna give the structure in the fireside. So as far as we talked a little bit offline, so he was thinking about doing like the Vacaville and the Cal Fire, and they kind of wanted to go Cal Fire because Vacaville is so tight. They have over 200 applicants and 5 people to try to join. And then he was wanting to go Cal Fire because of all the things that they do. And then there's anytime you do get a job, the number one thing people look at too is pay, of course. And so there's a significant difference from Vacaville to Cal Fire. So we did talk and of him trying to decide and go Cal Fire. So what are, I guess some insight or some words of wisdom for him to try this like new path, getting out of the military and going Cal Fire and just jumping into this new career in that sense?
So something that took me years to figure out and learn is that pay your money does not translate to happiness always.
Mhm.
And so I when I was at Contra Costa, I was the union vice president, and we represented 6 different fire departments. Of those 6 fire departments, if you looked at the one that was probably the most unhappy culture, they were actually paid the most.
Mm.
You looked at one of the happiest cultures, they were probably paid the least. One of my fire chief job up near Sacramento,
Mhm.
those guys were paid terrible, and they were just the most hardworking, most positive guys. Talk to them to this day, and I left there 3 years ago.
Wow.
In fact, I almost went camping with them last week. Just solid guys,
Mhm.
and just didn't complain, and they were paid terrible. And then I went to another department after that, and all they cared about was getting more pay and more time off, and they were paid very well to begin with. So I would say I would not look at a department's pay as the main reason to go to it. I would go visit stations, talk to the guys, and just get a feel for the culture, because the culture is everything. You could be a positive guy, go to work somewhere, where everyone's negative, pessimistic, and complaining all day. And you'll find yourself at some point kind of falling into that, feeling like you want to complain about things. And you have to,
Yeah.
I've caught myself in my career working at stations where guys complain. It's like, why am I complaining? I have the best job in the world. So I would look at what he gets from either of those departments. I'd say that Cal Fire, everyone I've met from Cal Fire has amazing work ethic and they're
Mhm.
positive for the most part. Vacaville is an amazing department. A good friend of mine was the deputy chief there. Um, and so you can't go wrong with either of those departments. But best advice I could say is visit a department, several stations, get to know the guys a little bit, just see the culture.
Mhm.
And if you find someplace you're happy, that's where you want to be. Um, because the pay, even when you're working for a department and you get a big pay raise, I've seen that where the morale was low, we got a pay raise and morale only goes up for a minute and then it goes right back down.
Yeah, he was I think, or let me back up. Not think, I know his work ethic is very, very good in the sense of his job that he does now. Because I went to go try out to branch off to do essentially what he does and to get a tab, and then unfortunately I got hurt and tore my bicep and all this stuff, and then here I am. But that stuff that they do. I mean, you know. It's like sometimes he can be like really gung ho, very quick. He knows. I mean, he knows his job to the T. And him doing something like this, relatively younger, I think, I don't know, he's going to watch this. So I think he's 24. I'm not too sure. But it's nice to get started at that age and get in, get your feet wet. And, that difference of pay that some people may look at, he's not really like worried about it, which is nice. But some people may look at that, and it's I personally think that him going Cal Fire is going to be the better decision, and you're always going to make connects because most of the time it's about who you know, and then his work ethic's going to carry with him, and I think he's going to have like a prosperous career in that sense. Um, and then after the show or after the podcast, I'll try to get some contacts and try to spread it his way to kind of help him out if he has any other questions. So, a question that I have for you is throughout your career in the stations that you have been at, do you feel that the stations that you've been to or now are in the right locations to optimize response capabilities and resources to respond to fires?
Sometimes with a giant asterisk. So a lot of these fire stations might be 40 years old. And so populations may have diminished in those areas. They may have grown.
Mhm.
Sometimes, like in Contra Costa County, we were like a dozen different fire departments 40 years ago. And so those fire departments would build stations within their city because we were 9 cities. So those cities would build fire stations to maximize response for their jurisdiction. They could give
Mhm.
a crap about their neighbors at the time. So they just built for their needs. And so now, 40 years later, some of those stations are too close to other stations. And so fortunately, what's been developed is some amazing dispatch systems, what they call CAD, computer aided dispatch. And what they
Mhm.
do is they use GPS and they monitor response times. And so they can analyze and they can say optimal locations of firehouses. So when it comes time to rebuild a fire station, they can say, over here is the best location. And granted, you have to find property, gotta buy and all that logistics issue of eminent domain if possible or if needed. But basically, um, gives you a lot more to work with because of analytics and data nowadays.
Okay. Um, so another question from a viewer is what would you consider an acceptable productivity level from an expert EMS personnel? I guess they're trying to say what would you expect out of personnel doing their job, when they come in and essentially, clock into work, and it's like what is expected of this professional, you know, um EMS personnel. If that makes sense to break it down for them.
Yeah. And I think the first primary thing for a fireman, a firefighter, a police officer, someone in the military is operational readiness.
Hmm.
You need to know your business. You need to know if
Hmm.
you're an EMS, you need to know your drugs, your policies to be dialed. And then secondary to that, I think it's your customer service. And so I always had the mindset of when I have a patient as a paramedic, and I leave, at the end of the day, I want that person to say that guy, that paramedic was or firefighter was the nicest guy I met today.
Right.
So I always had that in my mindset. I want to leave them thinking that I did them right. I did my job, and I want them to think this guy must love his job because of how nice he was. The fire chief, I recognized my main job was keeping people happy, whether it's the city manager, the city council, the customers would be citizens, my
Same
firefighters.
information.
Yeah, it's keeping people
Mhm.
happy, which is by doing my job, but doing it with a smile. And so I think an acceptable level of productivity is training, knowing your job, looking professional, then showing that high level of customer service.
Okay. I'll do one more question and then we'll kind of get back into it. Um, what would you say was the biggest challenge being up in Northern California in your position before you retired? If there was like a big challenge.
Uh, Personnel management.
Okay.
So when it comes down to it, as a fire chief, you're still managing government employees. So everyone's got that stereotypical image of a government employee. And even though they're firefighters, they're there to, to serve the public.
Mhm.
They always say that saying 20% of your staff takes up 80% of your time. No truer words have ever been spoken. And you might have silent majority supporting you, but at the end of the day, they're still silent. And so the biggest challenge was dealing with the problem employees without a doubt.
Okay. So getting in, starting your career, um, what are some things did you just mainly focus on your career the whole time while you were in, or was there other things that you were doing while you're in, whether it's like other hobbies or activities, or were you thinking about ever like, man, maybe I want to hang it up in 10 years or 15 years? What kept you busy in that sense during your career?
Well, I'm someone that can never sit still. I promoted
Okay.
quick, I think from every rank. I was
Wow.
probably the youngest battalion chief ever in Contra Costa. I was like 32. Granted, it's because I started very young too. 'Cause I went to
Right.
medic school really young, but I was always looking at ways to improve things. I think, and so that just pushed me. Um, I did at times feel like, even though I was at a very busy firehouse in North Richmond,
Hmm.
sometimes I felt like it was Groundhog Day. Like, yeah, we'll go to a house fire today. Yeah, we'll might go to a shooting, but we did that
Hmm.
yesterday. And so sometimes I felt like it was just repetitive, and I was thinking, okay, what else could I do with my life if needed? Um, I think that's where the entrepreneurial thing kind of came to my mind years ago. But the other aspect is I've raced motorcycles since 2008, and I raced cars before that. I still teach. I taught the beginning of this week, the 2 days up near Chico, California, to racetrack up there.
Okay.
So I still love motorcycles, even though I've caused many broken bones and high hospital bills. But that was kind of my escape. That was my extracurricular activity, and having that as my way to blow off steam.
Did you ever do anything with it in that sense? Like, like race professionally or do any kind of tournaments in that sense? Or, like what are some things that you did with that?
I started to race, so I did my first track day. This is road racing; it's not dirt bikes.
Hmm.
First track day in 2004, and I was racing cars at the time, Formula Mazdas, which are open wheel cars. I did well with that. I got third in the West Coast Championship. Um, and at the same time, I thought, man, motorcycles are more fun. And so I
Of course.
started racing them in 2008 with the American Federation of Motorcycles. Did that for a few years, did pretty well. It was very competitive. When I say
Hmm.
very well, it's like trying to get top 10. In 2014, I did the Pikes Peak Hill Climb in Colorado, where you
Oh,
race to the
wow.
top of
I think
Pikes
I've seen
Peak. I
that
think
on
it's like,
YouTube.
yeah, it's like 12 and a half miles, like 200 turns or something crazy. And if you
Jeez.
crash, you die. So you try not to. Kind of like the America's version of Isle of Man for anyone that's familiar with that race, which actually was occurring this last week.
Wow.
And then I kept racing with the AFM, and I won the championship for my class in 2019. And now I'm on their board of directors. And so
That's awesome. Okay,
yeah, so I don't race as much, but I still am involved.
so you said you teach that, like you go out and do the classes or courses with with other individuals?
Yeah, I work for an organization, called Carter's at the track, and we
Hmm.
we have track days. I can a few dozen track days a year, and then 3 times a year we'll do schools. Sometimes they're beginner actually more than 3, but with some of the beginner schools, advanced schools, and new racer schools. And this last week, this Monday and Tuesday, it's what, Thursday now. Monday and Tuesday, we had our advanced school up at the Thunder Hill Raceway.
Oh, okay. I think my it's I'm it's probably a stupid question, but is the Thunder Hill over there by Thunder Valley that like casino out there, or is that not a reference at all? Because that's what it sounds like.
Um, no relation, but it's close. To
Okay.
being close in
Y-
proximity, but no
Yeah.
relation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Definitely
Um,
not a relation, but just I heard Thunder and I just figured it was over in that area somewhere.
yeah, up off Highway 5, a
Okay.
little town called Willows. We also go to like Laguna Seca Raceway in Monterey, and then Sonoma Raceway, and we used to go to Utah and to Seattle. So it's good. That's kind of like my meditation
Okay.
because I
Yeah. No, I feel
go
that.
out and race bikes.
So when I don't want to screw this up, but did you retire in 2022?
Yeah, technically I resigned because
Resigned. That's right. Okay.
I'm not a retirement age. So technically I resigned
Okay.
because my company was taken off and I realized I had to pick one of the jobs.
No, yeah, it's so looking if you ever do look back or is it something that you would do like all over again? Like if Clive had to do it all over again, is it like would you, you know, 10 out of 10 go back and do it all over?
Probably wouldn't do it the same.
Okay.
I don't really have any regrets, especially because the path I took led me to meeting my wife a few
Hmm.
years ago, was 5 years ago. And so just for that factor alone, I wouldn't change anything. But I think I would have stopped and smelled the roses more. Like I said before, I promoted quick, and it was partly because there was a lot of opportunity to promote, and older guys would say, "Hey, promote now because the opportunities won't be there in a few years." And so I would take tests, and I'm not that smart, but I'd always score well on tests for whatever reason. And I came out number one on the Battalion Chief's test when I was way wasn't
Oh, dang.
that my skill wasn't there, but I didn't want to promote. And
Okay.
so in hindsight, I should have just enjoyed where I was at the current ranks. Like I loved driving the fire trucks. I loved being on a truck company, the truck companies with a big ladder on top.
Hmm.
I love going on roofs, cutting holes. I love going to house fires. And when you promote to a chief position, you're done. You don't go kicking indoors anymore. And I missed it because I was like 32. I wasn't done.
Dang.
And so looking back, I would have I think I would have stayed in different ranks for a longer period of time.
Okay. Kind of took off on the reins there. Let me see if there's another question somebody had real fast. Let's see. Might be able to skip some of these questions. I think there's like 15 questions I was able to gather from some individuals. Um, yeah, let's just jump into it. So the firefighter, or I mean, the career of that 25 years, and then resigning, and then so what started your the app, the LogRx. This is what I'm very interested in, how it works. Of course, there's probably tons of design behind it and getting a programmer or whatever. I don't know anything about that design stuff or apps. I just know like, hey, go to the app store. This is the name. Cool. I'll download it and I'll figure out how to use it. So, what started? Let's talk about this for the other half of this segment. Like, what what started that path, and you know, why did you do it? And just kind of get into it from there.
So it wasn't my first go at a startup. I actually
Mhm,
had another health and safety startup called Exposure Tracker that I started in 2014.
mhm,
It was a health and safety program for firefighters to track their exposures because I have lung damage from being a firefighter. And so I wanted to build something that guys could use to help protect themselves should they ever develop something like I did. So did that, and learned a ton from it. I learned more than I made money from it. And so I took that experience and, had this idea that because I've been a paramedic for so long and people would track narcotics on pen and paper. And like, no joke, you'd be tracking a fentanyl with just a notepad that would
you'll lose
or
it.
a checklist that would hang on the wall in the garage of a firehouse. and guys would sign it in the morning, sign it when they're done, when they go off duty, and if they remembered. And so the accountability was terrible. And there's been occasions where people have stolen them, people dropped them or broken them, whatever. They get lost. There's complacency because people are only going to take something as serious as management does.
Mhm.
And so I had this idea that, well, hey, all these vials have barcodes on them. Smartphones can scan. So why couldn't I design an app that just scans the barcodes already on these files? So I recruited these two developers in Santa Barbara, be the founders with me. We kind of came up with a rough plan. Quickly learned that all those barcodes for those drugs are the same for every lot number, which means you might have
Oh,
30,
wow.
40, 50, 100 vials with the same serial number on them. So those were useless, but okay, well, let's develop our own sticker. And so,
Hmm.
so then, and this is like 2016, then those two guys said, hey, we need to leave in good terms, but they had to leave from for their other job. And so I reached out to an old buddy who ran business. He wasn't a firefighter, but he knew the industry. Recruited him to come work with me. He brought in another developer, and we just hit the ground running. I think it was like 2018, maybe 2017,
Mhm.
and just scrapped everything, rebuilt it, and basically, my experience knowing the industry and knowing the product, I was able to kind of tell the developer how and what it should look like. He was able to build it, and then my buddy that is a co-founder now, he was able to put the business sense into it. It was like, okay, if you're going to do this, this is, how are we going to make money off this? How are we going to sell it? How are you going to make this marketable? How is it going to be adopted?
Mhm.
Got to be easy to use. And so between the three of us, we all brought so much to the table that it really started taking off in about 2019, and then just progressed to the point that in 2021, I realized it was taking off to where I needed to hire because all of us were doing it part time.
Okay.
And so I realized, uh-oh, this is really getting ahead of steam. And we have paying customers that we're tracking their narcotics. Like we can't screw this up.
I do.
And so I originally had an exit plan for Tahoe of April of 2023. And I realized there was no way I was going to make that. I needed to let go and drop the fire chief thing to run my company.
So so you do that full time now, right? That's like plain okay. And so it's if this was a narcotic, it would have like does it have you said it has your like barcode on it depending on what it is, or it's just its own and they track it and scan it that way?
We have these uh kind of like they're not totally tamper evident, but they're kind of like tamper evident QR codes with a code written on the side.
Okay.
They go over the top of the vial and they can't scratch. You can't really peel them
Tamper.
up.
Mm.
Yeah, they don't really tear. So you'd have to use fire or a knife to actually damage them. And it took a while to design that. Like everything building a company, you got to think of everything. And so just designing these stickers took some work. But you see, our unique code goes on every single vial for customers. And then in our app, there's a way to basically speed import all these vials. So it doesn't take an agency long to import 40, 50 vials, like a couple minutes. And so
Wow.
with our stickers on them, they can have that imported into their system and have complete accountability of every drug vial in their department. Like the city of Portland's are a customer of ours, and they have like 50 plus firehouses. Every single one of those firehouses, we could tell you right now which vial of narcotics is in each one of those. And most
S-
importantly, they can.
So is it I mean, of course, it's going to probably be different based on per firehouse, but do they not carry too many vials, or is it like a strict thing, like a certain amount of narcotics and this, that, and the other, and then that way it makes it easy for them to upload this into their system and then scan it and track it?
So I echo chamber I've been in since my career started as a paramedic. I felt like,
Hmm.
okay, I can build something for what I'm used to.
Hmm.
That's it. And then all of a sudden you realize, well, not everybody does it the same way. In my mind, it's like, how hard is it to track just a medication?
Sure.
Essentially you're building an inventory map or app. And so going around and figuring out all the different ways people track narcotics made it so we had to really make a dynamic app that could accommodate them. And so some agencies might have 5 different narcotics. They might have 2 different. They might have 3 of each. They might store them in a safe. They might store them in a pouch that's in a bag in a locked cabinet. They might be with a supervisor, and then they have maybe 200 at a safe. And so we had to build the app and the program. There's an app and then there's an admin website where the administrators can see everything on the cloud-based website. And so we had to build something that would accommodate all these different situations and scenarios.
So, if you can, I guess, somewhat walk me through. So if I'm, a firefighter over there, and we have the app downloaded on the device, and then, I go over to a cabinet or whatever, wherever the narcotics are at, and I grab it. So as soon as, like, if I were to open up that drawer, I scan it. So that way it tracks that it is, like, essentially like in or out of its original position, and then where it's going. Or how does the tracking system work for that?
So we wanted to design something where the customer, which would be a fire department or like an ambulance company, would not have to buy any hardware. Basically, everyone's got a smartphone, or every
Hmm.
ambulance has a smartphone or a tablet. And so we thought, okay, what features do smartphones already have that we can take advantage of? We thought, okay, they have scanners, they have biometrics, they have cell service, and they have GPS tracking. And so we took advantage of all that to basically use the biometrics to see who's doing what. We use a scanner to scan our codes, use a GPS location to show where they're doing their activity and time stamping it. And based off the DEA's regulations, anytime an activity occurs with a narcotic, you're supposed to be tracking it and you're supposed to have a verifier. Your partner is verifying that, hey, I
Uh,
just administered 60 micrograms of fentanyl and I wasted another 40. So that verifier then has to use the app to confirm what I just did. And so basically, anytime a paramedic or firefighter goes and grabs that vial out of the drug box, like you just asked, they'll scan it with our app, and we intentionally made it very simple to use because we want to make it, as we call it, firefighter proof. I'm not sure if there's a similar saying in the military.
I mean, I definitely get what you're saying. I'm tracking.
So there's only 2 buttons, and they just hit scan or inventory check. If they hit scan, they scan the vial, and then it'll pop down a list of options for them to do. And so it basically walks them through the process of administering it, transferring it, wasting it, whatever they want to do. And it's really, really simple. And then it forces them to have a verifier, so they're in DEA compliant. So even if they're not familiar with the rules, it'll help them out.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that makes them be accountable because they want to grab it, they scan it, and they don't have to sit there and write on paper like you said and put it up and forget it. Because I myself have sometimes, like, written down on a piece of paper somewhere. If it's like out of sight, out of mind, I'll forget. I mean, it's just how it works sometimes. But everybody always carries a smart device with them, essentially, or has it um, accessible. So that, I mean, that's really awesome. It sounds like it's just too easy to use. Essentially, are you guys? Is there? Have you guys looked at ways of possibly making it better than what it is, or branching out, or is it like the way it is now is just it's so perfect and it's very smooth? And also, another question, the businesses that you sell it to, have they come back and been like, hey, is there a certain way to do this better or different for us, and you guys have to, like, kind of, try to adjust the app, or is that just not possible? It's a lot.
So a lot of everyone that's gotten in the software business, when they have a customer, the customers always say, "This is great. Can it do this or that?"
Hmm.
Like, they'll want some feature for their scenario. And what we'll do
Hmm.
is we'll look at it and say, is that feedback something that will apply to other customers? So, for example, Portland asked, "Can you take a picture of the drug box during the daily check?" Like, yep, we could do that because other customers will also like that feature. And so we're launching that feature next week. And so we are pretty dynamic, which is unique for a startup versus a big established company where they you have bureaucracies, but we can make those agile adjustments to our program based off that customer feedback. So we are constantly working to improve it in that aspect. But as far as your question about expanding,
Hmm.
um, we are looking for designing the ability to track more than just narcotics. So medical supplies, firefighting gear, equipment that you might have in the engine or the ambulance. We kind of have a strategic plan on ways we're going to build out different modules because a lot of customers have been asking for that lately. They say, "Hey, this is great. We have this other software to track our equipment. We'd love it if we could just do that on yours and not have 2 separate softwares."
Sounds like something you should take to Shark Tank with a pitch.
Yeah.
I mean, I could probably see Cuban coming on with something like that, but um, man, it's just I'm trying to think of some questions in the sense because there's so much kind of processing in. So, um, I believe you guys do have some things over in the UK as well, right? Like you have some buyers in the UK.
Yeah, we had the largest ambulance company in England using our program.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Have you guys gone anywhere else besides that, or is that just kind of like this is enough for right now? Like we don't want to overload ourselves, or you guys are like literally trying to brand out other countries?
So we have ambulance company in Papua New Guinea
Okay.
that we're looking to do a trial with. We have a because of the time zone difference. My sales director and myself are doing a demo tonight at midnight for a call at 8 a.m. in England tomorrow.
Okay.
And then I'm flying to England, actually Scotland, in a couple of weeks. Go and meet up with hopefully a channel partner in England. So they'll be like a reseller for us. And so I'll
That's
spend like a
awesome.
month in England, starting at the end of this month, just to kind of help set up a base over there and try to expand. Plus, we're going to the Isle of Man,
Okay.
which if you're
I've
not
seen
familiar
that.
with this little island,
Hmm.
yeah. So we're gonna try and meet with them and go to a motorcycle race while we're there.
Does the wife get to come along with you?
She is, and so
Okay.
it took some arm twisting. Oh yeah, she wanted to go. It was
Oh,
very much. We
perfect.
love traveling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
the
my wife and
motorcycle
I.
race. Yeah.
That's
So
that's exciting, man. It sounds like there's the possibilities are endless. And have you guys thought about doing? I don't know if you touched base on it a few minutes ago, but in the sense of tracking other things outside of like medicinal supplies, like if you're trying to do inventory at like a store or like a food stand or something, like is it going to be an app that is just going to kind of be a competitor for other things that you guys might have a slight advantage on, or what is your guys' view with the company where you have right now and where you want to take it?
um, it's tough branching out because when you're building a company, and we got this, we got interest from dentists, we got interest from
I was
veterinary
just going to ask you about
clinics.
that.
Yeah, a lot of different industries, and we even got we had a sheriff's department back east that used our program as a trial to track their heroin, crack, and other drugs that they would train their canines with.
Mm,
Because it was actually drugs, illicit drugs, and they would take it to a junkyard, throw it in the trunk of a car, and the canines would go find it, but they wanted to track it. And so it's tempting with a startup to see, okay, this person could write us a check. So let's divert some energy and resources towards it. We found that it was taking away from our main base, which is emergency medical services in fire departments.
mhm,
And so we kind of adjusted it to accommodate veterinarians, because we use veterinarians who work out in the field,
mhm,
um, like game wardens and such. But branch out to clinics, which we do have some. We realized you only have so much development time, they have so much staff time, and you start making your program less attractive to our main base, and they might fall off. And then you have this other industry that you've just kind of got a little bit of interest in. Does that make sense?
yeah, no, it does. I mean, it just reminds me of like two of like the three businesses that I did have at a time, and like one of them, it was essentially trying to go the same route. Like I wanted to kind of stay right here and focus on this and really kind of like dominate that area, but it's just like the fact of knowing that you could just spider web effect and kind of go out and do other things, but that's like a quick distraction. And where you guys are going now is going to be huge on its own because almost everywhere you have firefighters, paramedics, the whole nine. Like they're there. They're your first responders. I think you guys. I mean, it sounds like what you guys created and have and going forward is. I'm not too familiar with the industry, but it definitely seems kind of like some groundbreaking stuff that you guys are going to have and just really kind of come up and take the rug out from I guess other competitors if there is competitors out there. Um, so in that industry alone, do you guys, or in your industry alone, do you know if there are like other competitors? You don't need to like name drop anything, but just in the sense of like what other competing apps that there are as compared to yours.
We do. There's probably 4 main competitors. I'm biased, but I'm very, very confident we have the best program. Um, for a lot of the variables I've already talked about, they don't
It's two
have a lot of
buttons.
those.
That's
Yeah, and it's the smartphone. A lot of some of them, you have to, like, buy a scanner, you have to do it from your computer at the station. Ours works offline, so you don't have to have cell reception, so if
oh,
you're in
that's
a we have a lot
perfect.
of yeah, we have a lot of air transport companies use our program for, like, medical transport, so they can use it up in the plane. But when I look at competitors, and this is something back with racing motorcycles, in my brain, I always think, "Okay, what's my unfair advantage? What do I have over them
Hmm.
they can't compete with?" And so for me, my background goes so far. Like I hate sales, but I'm good at it because I can talk to fire chiefs and other people because I've been there. I've done that job. And so when they
Hmm.
say they throw out a scenario, I can say, "Oh yeah, here's how you address that." And they like I have customers that will call me chief because they know my background.
Right.
And so out of respect, someone that's paying me money calls me chief. And so that's one of our unfair advantage. The other thing is our team. Like everyone besides myself also is just rock star in the industry. My wife, who's done media for 20 years, she's our marketing director, and so she's just amazing at building our brand. And so to beat out our competitors, we look at those ways we can exploit our unfair advantages and kind of beat them.
That's awesome. You guys definitely have like the power team, and then of course like you and your wife doing it together. I mean, you guys are gonna piggyback off each other and thrive. It's awesome. Have you guys thought about using that over in like the military hospitals in that aspect, or is it just kind of like too wonky with DoD regulations and having that kind of sensitive information? Like, is that something you guys looked at?
Yeah. We're trying to branch out as much as we can.
Mhm.
Military would be amazing.
Mhm.
I pushed my brother to help get us in because he was in the Marines. Now he's in the Coast Guard. He's a pilot. Um, uh, and then we actually had a base with a certain branch that wanted to use our program. They asked, "Hey, can we track our explosives with with your program?" I said, "There's only
Yeah.
one way to find out."
I mean, that's very good, but I mean, it just seems like very sensitive information too for something like that. Because we handle that stuff too all the time where I work as far as um, explosives. But I mean, if so, I feel like that's going to be huge because obviously all the bases is going to be. I would assume it would be I don't know if it'd be branch specific or just DoD in general contract, but I mean don't let them undercut you guys because the DoD's got that money, and they're
Yeah.
always going to try to save it in penny pinch. I'm pretty sure you've seen the some of the crappy inventory that military gets as far as armor and everything else. So that'll be awesome. That's very exciting. So what are some new things on the horizon that you guys have besides um, to going overseas in about a month? You said like what do you guys have in the next like 6 months to a year, like 18 months out that you guys have planned for the company?
So is it the additional modules we're gonna
Okay.
launch with tracking equipment? We've increased our team size. We hired another developer, a senior developer,
Oh,
which
great.
is a really big deal. Finding a really solid programmer. We're fortunate to that. We found also a rock star in sales, a guy that's been in the industry for 20 plus years. Um, and then I'm sure you know from just working with guys in the military, your team makes all the difference.
Yeah.
The men and women you work with is what you go to work for. I mean, I remember jobs that was great fire department, just miserable people to work with at times. And so the great thing about our company is we all love working with each other, and the two new hires that are really going to help us excel, just so fun to work with. And so that's really going to help launch us over the next couple of years. I mean, we brought in the sales director last month. He just hit a month with us, and I couldn't tell you how many deals he's already closed. He's already got so many in the pipeline. just blows me away the talent, the art that some guys have. And he's not like a slimy sales rep.
Yeah,
That's what I
yeah,
love about
that's
him.
perfect.
Yeah, so that's what we're really excited about is just really ramping up our company in the next couple of years.
It sounds like you have some veteran and some heavy hitters on the team that you guys are gonna gel very well together. I have a buddy in Arizona that does. Um, I hope I don't butcher this, but he does medical sales as well. He's been doing it for a while. He's very good at it, and he handles machines for I think it's like cardiograms. I'm not too sure in that sense, but he goes out and he travels all the time and flies out from Arizona to Vegas and sits in these meetings and sometimes surgeries with doctors and goes over equipment and stuff like that. So I wonder if that is something that just if I kind of like link you guys up through an email or if I can just like pitch that to him and be like, hey, is this something that you think you could work with? And then in that sense, if it, you know, anything to help you out and to grow. I mean, at the end of the day, I always love to see people succeed and just everybody eat at the table. Um, so I'm gonna try to get that done and see what I can do for that. And then also offline, gonna try to get a couple of those connects for my buddy that's gonna transition over into the Cal Fire. Um, I appreciate you sitting down here and us getting this squared away. I'm glad I made a calendar set because it's been a few weeks in the making in that sense of, I mean, we locked in the date, but then there's just so much, and I know you're so busy. So it was nice to sit down and very interesting story. 25 years and all the things you did in between and the broken bones and transitioning and becoming and creating this app that is I think is very very awesome, and then being involved in so many commendable things throughout your career so far. And you said you're only 45.
Yep.
I mean, you're doing it at an age like that for most people. So, which is awesome. So, Clive, I appreciate you coming on here and sitting down with me and kind of gracing the podcast with your experience.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is fun. I love talking about this kind of stuff. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, no problem. So I haven't done this before, but I think I might start doing it as like a question to ask people at the very end. I did this at the very first base that I went to when I sat down with my colonel. Uh, and it just put a smile and a chuckle on his face. I don't think he saw it coming. So, one question is Chick-fil-A or Popeyes?
I love Popeyes just because when I was a kid, my dad took me to one in San Francisco and I'd never had it before.
Okay.
I don't think I'd ever had KFC.
Yeah.
And so I think to this day, because I probably haven't had it in 10 plus years,
Okay.
just because I remember having it with my dad in San Francisco like 35, 40 years ago, and how like, oh my God. My mom was a hippie, and so we would just eat like granola and you know, stuff with no
Berries.
flavor. But I'm healthy to
Okay.
this day because of her. So I'm not criticizing her.
No,
But
yeah.
having Popeyes that age,
Okay.
I think it's stuck with me all the years. So
Okay. So
that's funny.
So Popeyes it is. All right. Okay. Yeah, so this is gonna be our episode with Clive Savacool. And if you guys can check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Gonna get this out here for you guys shortly in the coming days. Um I I enjoyed it. Again, thank you for coming on, Clive. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Alrighty. See you guys.